Hello, and welcome back to Wellness and Womb. Today we are going to talk about hormone replacement therapy, something that is really common. A lot of women will come to me and they've been taking estrogen, they've been taking progesterone. One of the clients I worked with, she could barely get through a call with me without bawling her eyes out. She just completely was beside herself, not feeling like who she was at all, and couldn't figure out why that was the case. Well, let's discuss a little bit around hormone replacement therapy and why I am not a fan of it. So, when we are thinking of optimal health, I think there is this story that has been fed to us as women that our bodies are broken in some way. Because as soon as we start menstruating, which is ideally 14, most of us are not beginning to menstruate at 14, though. There are some girls who are as young as 8 that I have heard of, which is mind-blowing to me. And that is an issue. That is a very big issue because to me, when I hear that we are menstruating early, that means that the body is trying to remove iron because iron is regulated through blood loss. So a lot of the time we are struggling with our heavy periods and told that birth control is the solution to that. Most women don't even go on birth control to prevent pregnancy. A lot of women are going on it because of the symptoms with PMS, with heavy menstrual cycles, with different issues that are coming up from it. And that's part of the problem. Okay, so we're starting off our teenage years, some younger than that, where people don't understand. The people that we're going to for advice don't understand why it's happening, and they are taught to diagnose and prescribe. That's issue number one. So our bodies are flawed in some way because we're having these symptoms with our body trying to communicate to us that there's too much iron in the tissues, we don't have enough copper, and it's trying to get rid of it. Then we go on birth control for years and years and years, and we stop having menstrual cycles because that's just simply not happening when we are on birth control. And then we struggle to conceive, can't figure out why that's, not working. And then a lot of women are struggling with perimenopause symptoms, 35, 40, can't figure out what's wrong, and they're having all of these very intense issues. Well, how does that relate back to iron? So a lot of women are being told that it's their hormones, that estrogen, it drops, there's these issues with hormones, and that if we just take hormone replacement therapy, that our problems will go away. Well, what if it's not our hormones? Because hormones are messengers. They don't run the body, minerals do. Minerals are what's in our food, it's what's in our soil. Big Pharma can't come up with a product that's going to mimic minerals, so there's no money in that, but they can come up with synthetic hormones. Are you catching on? Are you seeing where this connection is yet? So that's why there's hormone replacement therapy. There's not going to be mineral therapy because there's no way of making that, a standalone item that's really going to work. Even the copper IUD disrupts, even though there's no hormones in it specifically, it's going to disrupt hormones. That's what it's going to do because minerals run the body. The body can't make minerals, but it can make hormones. So what does that mean? It means that at the end of the day, if our minerals are imbalanced, then hormones are going to be as well. And in order to regulate iron, we need bioavailable copper. If you watched any of my previous videos, then I would suggest going back and watching the fundamentals of iron's movement because that's going to fill in some of the blanks with some of the things that I just said. So typically women will be suggested to have hormone replacement therapy because, there are these woes for us being women that means that we need to be medicated in order to get through life as women. You need birth control, you need some hormone replacement therapy. It's just what things are, these symptoms are just so intense. Our bodies are not trying to communicate with us. They're not trying to heal. The heavy menstrual cycle is not a good thing, when really all of that is just simply not the case. So things like hot flashes. What does a hot flash mean? I have had women who have begun taking cod liver oil who then no longer struggle with hot flashes anymore. Well, that's interesting. What does cod liver oil have to do in all of this? Cod liver oil is what helps make copper bioavailable, and it's what helps move iron. So that's really important to point out. Think of the different narratives that we've been fed where vitamin A is toxic, where we really need to watch our vitamin A consumption, especially vitamin A in the form of retinol. And a lot of women are not consuming a lot of retinol while they're pregnant. So, not all babies are born equal. That wouldn't make any sense that if somebody consumed McDonald's for every single meal and then, they were pregnant and that woman then carried that child eating McDonald's, that somebody who consumed grass-fed and finished animal products and lived off the land and had access to all these different things, it wouldn't make any sense that we would assume that those two children would be born with the same amount of minerals coming into this world. Babies are not born equal. And part of the issue is that women are being told to not consume things while they're pregnant that are actually quite important. Vitamin A has a very important role. And when we're talking about whole food forms, there's other nutrients that all come together with it that help the body to get to a state of balance. Because it's not just vitamin A on its own. It's vitamin D that's naturally occurring. There are things that are part of it that are much smarter than I, but when it's in its whole food form, that's really important. Of course, obviously, quality matters. Where you are sourcing your cod liver oil from is very important. There are only a few that I really believe in, because I have had women who have come to work with me because they haven't been able to figure out what's going on. They saw some of my content on TikTok or Instagram, and what I had said worked, and then they changed brands, and then they decided that they needed to work with me, and then we changed them back to the brands that they were taking before, and it starts working again. So the quality is really important. And I will not say the brands right now, because in case those brands decide to change their quality, I don't want it. I don't want this video to not be valid anymore. So check out my free ebooks to see the ones that I currently will stand behind. I think that's important. Another thing that can be a really common issue is vaginal dryness. Not talked about a lot. I would even say that another really common one, which I think is just incredibly sad because it's not spoken about enough, but that's chronic UTIs. Constantly having different infections, where some women are not able to be intimate with their husbands anymore because whenever they do, they have an infection. And that has a lot to do with bioavailable copper. So first off, vaginal dryness has to do with vitamin A. Again, it's going to come back to that. If we have enough vitamin A, that actually, somebody who has chronic constipation, having vitamin A can be really helpful. So cod liver oil, not just vitamin A on its own, and I want to make a point of that. It's not about just vitamin A. Again, there's more things that go into this than I am above my head, smarter than I. But when it's naturally occurring, it's going to have these things that are in harmony with one another. And if we were just to take them in isolation, it just simply would not work the same. But when we have things like cod liver oil or beef liver, it actually helps lubricate the digestive tract. And that can be really helpful, especially when we are looking to have a bowel movement. So somebody with chronic constipation, one of the things that can help is cod liver oil or beef liver, things like that. And so when we're thinking of vaginal dryness, the same thing can help, where that is helping with lubrication. So, I think a lot of the time that's just not talked about. Again, the other one where we're thinking of chronic infections it can have a lot to do with not having enough copper. Because when we have a cold, one of the first things that the body does is it takes copper out of the bone marrow and puts it into the blood. Iron and zinc then get put into storage. And why? We need to ask, why is the body doing that? Because 46% of our copper in our body is meant to be in our bone marrow. B vitamins are also really rich there as well. I want to point that out because a lot of people think that they are unable to digest B vitamins because they have the MTHFR and they need it methylated. It's just simply not the case. They have been sold this lie that they need one, they're not able to have one synthetic B vitamin, but they need a different synthetic one instead. It's not how the body works. It wants whole food B vitamins. And so when the body is releasing the copper to go and fight the infection, it's going to get stuck in this vicious cycle if it doesn't have enough copper, because then it's not going to have enough copper to fight off infections, and then it doesn't have enough to go back into storage, and there's too much iron accumulating, and it becomes a cycle. So really the key at the end of the day can be to regulate iron, to get it, move it, and then remove it from our bodies. Part of the issue is that iron has been fortified in Canada, the UK, and the United States since 1941. And I want to make it very, very clear that the narrative that more iron to solve low iron simply does not work. Because if it did, nobody would be anemic. And in fact, the people who wanted to increase the amount of iron added to foods, they agreed that it didn't work. That was their whole standpoint. In 1960, in 1970, it was almost 30 years. Yeah, so it would have almost been 30 years that they were doing it for. The year has slipped my mind. I believe it was 1970, but there was a group that went before the United States and they said, listen, what we have been doing, people are still anemic. And so rather than having this amount of iron fortification to our foods, we actually want to 4 times the amount. I want you to think about that from an investor standpoint. If somebody came to you and said, hey, I have this business and I really could use an injection of cash, about 4 times the amount that you had originally put in 30 years ago. And you'd be like, okay, why is it that you need that amount of money? Well, what we had done 30 years ago, and we have been doing for the last 30 years, it hasn't actually worked. So the best solution is to just do it 4 times as hard and see if that works. That was their proposal. That was the suggestion. It's ridiculous. But they actually decided to increase the amount of iron by 50%, and now we don't know actually the amount of iron fortification that's going on. So taking more iron in isolation to improve iron is not the case. It's not going to work. It's been proven that it doesn't work. We need to move iron. Iron does not work in isolation. It works with other minerals, other nutrients, and that's really, really important. So when we're thinking of how to move iron, again, go and watch the Movement of Iron Fundamentals. And then once we get that going, once we start getting we start looking at removing or swapping out, depending on how you want to look at it, iron fortified foods for whole foods, for organic, gluten-free can be a good way to go about not having iron fortified flours, or organic non-fortified flour is a route to go. And we start looking at our supplements, then, I think a good way to look at this is we have to look back and wonder what we have been putting into our bodies all of this time. Because a lot of us have taken prenatals, a lot of us have taken these synthetic supplements without realizing it. A lot of them are marketed as ways that they have whole foods in them, and they might have some whole foods, but then a lot of the times they still have these synthetic ingredients, and we're just simply not smarter than how we were designed. So things need to be naturally occurring. They need to be in whole foods, whether that's put into a supplement, but that's one way to get it in, but we're simply missing nutrients. And so as we age, we accumulate iron. That's what ages us. And that's part of the issue, that when we hit our 30s and our 40s, and we have been accumulating iron, some of us getting iron infusions, some of us, having all of these different issues, and they start to magnify and then creep up, and that's a huge issue. So moving and then removing, because iron's regulated through blood loss. So focusing on bloodletting when we have a hemoglobin that allows us to do that is really, really important. It's never the first step that I work with my clients. It would be something that we would ease into. We would be working on supporting the body to heal first, building up minerals, so that when we do have a blood loss, that it's not just super depleting, we're not just really exhausted, because we don't want to put the body under extra, like that amount of extra stress. But there's a hormone that's made when we have blood loss that's going to help tell the body to release more iron from the tissues and build more red blood cells, and that's really what we're after. So we are not broken as women. Hormone replacement therapy really boggles my mind. I just don't understand why that's our first step, and I think that it's a complete. It saddens me. It saddens me that a lot of women are asking for help and the answers aren't known. So it's just to continue to medicate, and then that doesn't mean that that's solving anything. That's not getting the body back to balance. Muting the symptoms is not meaning that the actual issue of what started it is going away. So with all of that being said, if you are interested in learning more, if you want to know more about how iron moves and understand some of the supplements that I recommend, head on over to the links down below. I have a free school community that you can join, and there's tons of information in there. And of course, if you are looking for more help, then there are obviously options available to you there, but free ebooks there for you to enjoy. All right, I'll see you guys soon.